I woke up to the sound of demolition equipment rumbling outside my lakefront home, the noise impossibly close like someone was tearing down my backyard. Throwing on a robe, I rushed to the window overlooking Lake Havasu, and my heart stopped. A bulldozer was actively crushing my boat shed, the one I'd spent 3 weekends building last month. "What the hell?" I shouted, rushing downstairs and out the back door in my slippers, not even bothering to tie the robe properly. By the time I reached the shoreline, half the structure was already reduced to splintered wood and twisted metal. I ran toward the operator, waving my arms frantically. "Stop! Stop right now!" I screamed over the engine noise. The bulldozer operator, looking confused, killed the engine. Standing beside the machine was a middle-aged woman in a pantsuit, arms crossed, and a smug expression plastered across her face. I recognized her immediately. Karren Henderson, the newly elected president of our lake community's HOA. "Good morning, Mr. Grayson," she said with artificial sweetness. "We're just enforcing the community guidelines you've been violating." "Xavier Grayson," I corrected automatically, still in shock. "And what violations? That's my boat shed on my property," Karren sniffed, producing a tablet from her designer tote bag. "According to the Lakeside Estates HOA bylaws, Section 12, Paragraph 3, no waterfront structures may exceed 8 feet in height or be constructed of non-approved materials. Your—" She paused, looking at the half-demolished shed with distaste. Eyesore was nearly 10 feet tall and made of that hideous corrugated metal. I ran my hands through my hair in disbelief. "You can't just demolish someone's property without notice." "Oh, but we can," Karren smiled, turning her tablet toward me. "We sent 3 violation notices over the past month. The last one clearly stated that if corrections weren't made by today, removal would begin. It's all quite legal." "I never received any notices," I growled. "Well, they were sent." "Perhaps you should check your mail more carefully," she shrugged, turning to the operator. "Continue, please." "Stop." I held up my hand. "I'm calling the police. You can't do this." Karren's smile only widened. "Actually, when you purchased your home last year, you signed the HOA agreement. Page 27 gives us the right to remedy violations at the homeowner's expense after proper notification. The police will simply tell you it's a civil matter." That's when it hit me. Last year, when I purchased this property, I hadn't just bought the charming lakefront home, I had acquired the entire waterfront parcel, extending 400 yards in both directions. The previous owner, an elderly developer, had sold me the lot at a steep discount because I'd helped his grandson start a tech company years ago. I had the deeds to prove it. I stepped closer to Karren, finding a strange calm suddenly washing over me. "Mrs. Henderson, do you know exactly where the HOA's jurisdiction ends on this property?" She waved dismissively. "The Lakeside Estates HOA covers all 52 homes in our community, including all common areas and waterfront access points." "Interesting," I said, pulling out my phone. "Because I actually own this entire waterfront stretch. It's private property, not HOA common area." Karren's expression faltered for just a second before she regained her composure. "That's ridiculous. The waterfront is community property." "It was," I corrected, "until Elliot Winters sold the entire parcel to me last year. I have the survey and deed right here." I pulled up the documents on my phone. "Your HOA has jurisdiction over my house and yard, but the waterfront, including where my boat shed stands, is my private property, outside HOA control." The bulldozer operator, a burly man with a salt and pepper beard, turned off his machine completely and climbed down. "Madam, I ain't continuing until this is sorted. I don't demolish private property without proper authorization." Karren's face flushed as she snatched my phone to examine the documents. "These could be faked," she muttered, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "Call the county assessor's office," I suggested. "They open in 30 minutes. In the meantime, you're trespassing on my private property and you've already destroyed half of my shed." The reality of the situation was slowly dawning on Karren's face. If what I was saying was true, and it absolutely was, she had just authorized the destruction of private property outside HOA jurisdiction. That wasn't just an HOA overreach, it was actual criminal damage. "There must be some misunderstanding," she stammered, backing away slightly. "The board was under the impression that all waterfront areas fell under our purview." "Your impression is wrong," I said firmly. "And now I'm calling the police to file a report for the damage you've already caused." I held up my phone, dialing 911. Karren's face went from flushed to pale. "Now, Mr. Grayson, surely we can work something out without involving the authorities. The HOA has insurance for these misunderstandings." "It's not a misunderstanding when you demolish someone's property without verifying you have the authority," I replied as the 911 operator answered. "Yes, hello. I'd like to report destruction of private property at 1428 Lakeside Drive." The Lakeside Estates HOA has illegally demolished a structure on my private waterfront property. What started as a nightmare of a morning was about to become an even bigger headache for Karren Henderson and her power-tripping HOA board. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a battle that would expose corruption, illegal activities, and a conspiracy that went far beyond my demolished boat shed. The police arrived within 15 minutes, 2 officers in a Lake Havasu city patrol car. Officer Ramirez and Officer Jenkins took statements from everyone present, including the bulldozer operator who freely admitted he was just following the HOA's instructions. Karren maintained her composure but couldn't hide her nervousness as the officers examined my property deed and survey maps. "Mr. Grayson," Officer Ramirez said after reviewing the documents, "these appear legitimate but will need to verify with the county. In the meantime, no further demolition can take place." "What about my destroyed shed?" I asked. "If your documentation is verified, this would constitute criminal damage to property," Officer Jenkins explained. "You can file charges if you wish to pursue that route." Karren's professional facade cracked. "This is absurd. The HOA has managed this waterfront for 20 years. "Actually," I interjected, "Mr. Winters retained ownership but granted usage rights to the HOA. When he sold me the property, those rights transferred to me. It's all in the deed." Officer Ramirez nodded. "We'll sort this out. In the meantime, Mrs. Henderson, I'd advise you and the HOA to consult with your attorney before taking any further action." After the police left, with the bulldozer operator packing up his equipment, Karren cornered me in my yard. "Xavier," she said, dropping the formalities, her voice lowered, "you don't understand what you're doing. The board won't take this lightly." "Is that a threat, Karren?" I asked, not bothering to hide my anger. She straightened her jacket. "It's a reality check. We have 49 other homeowners who support our vision for this community. You're making a powerful enemy." "By defending my property rights," I scoffed. "By undermining years of established order," she countered. "This waterfront has been under HOA control since the community was built. Your technicality doesn't change the community's expectations." "It's not a technicality, it's property law," I said firmly. "And if the HOA wants to use my waterfront, we can negotiate reasonable terms which don't include demolishing my structures without permission." Karren's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that. The board meets tomorrow evening. I suggest you attend if you want any hope of resolving this amicably." As she walked away, I surveyed the damage to my shed. At least half of it was completely destroyed, with my fishing equipment and boat maintenance tools scattered among the debris. The custom boat lift I'd installed was damaged beyond repair. The cost would run into thousands. My phone rang. It was my buddy Marcus, who lived 3 doors down. "X, what the hell happened? I just drove past and saw the police leaving your place." I explained the situation while picking through the wreckage of my shed. "Dude, you really own the whole waterfront?" Marcus sounded impressed. "Yep. Winters included it in the sale because I helped his grandson Timothy with that startup funding. I never made a big deal about it because I was fine with neighbors using the shoreline. I'm not some land hoarder." "Karren's going to lose her mind," Marcus chuckled. "She's been planning a big community dock project. The board already voted to approve the funds." This was news to me. "What dock project?" "Some massive shared dock with boat slips they can rent out. It's been Karren's pet project since she joined the board. They're supposed to break ground next month." I looked out at the peaceful lakefront, imagining it cluttered with a commercial-style dock operation. "They can't build anything without my permission." "Well, according to the HOA newsletter, they're already accepting deposits for boat slips. $2,000 each." The pieces started falling into place. The rushed demolition of my shed suddenly made sense. They needed to clear the area for their dock project, and my shed was in the way. The fact that Karren had never bothered to verify property boundaries before authorizing demolition spoke volumes about her approach to HOA leadership. I spent the rest of the day documenting the damage, calling my insurance company, and consulting with a property attorney named Stephanie Martinez, who specialized in HOA disputes. She confirmed what I already knew: the HOA had massively overstepped. "Mr. Grayson, if your deed is as clear as you describe, you have an open and shut case for damages," Stephanie advised. "But I'm more concerned about what sounds like fraud regarding this dock project. If they're collecting money for boat slips on property they don't control, that's a serious legal issue." "Should I attend their board meeting tomorrow?" I asked. "Absolutely. Document everything. Record the meeting if Florida law permits it, and don't sign anything they put in front of you." The following evening, I arrived at the community clubhouse 15 minutes before the scheduled HOA meeting. The room was already half full with neighbors, some of whom I recognized but many I didn't. Being relatively new to the community and working long hours remotely as a software developer, I hadn't made many connections yet. Karren was at the front table with 4 other board members, shuffling papers and whispering urgently. When she spotted me, her expression soured momentarily before she plastered on a fake smile. "Xavier, so glad you could join us," she called out, loud enough for others to hear. "We have you on the agenda under special business." I nodded but said nothing, taking a seat in the back row. Marcus arrived a few minutes later, giving me a supportive nod as he sat beside me. "Brought backup," he whispered. "My cousin's a real estate attorney, told her what happened, and she said this is textbook HOA overreach." At precisely 7:00 p.m., Karren called the meeting to order, running through standard business with mechanical efficiency budget reports, landscaping updates, and a reminder about the community garage sale. Finally, she reached the item I was waiting for. Now, for special business. As some of you may have heard, we had a misunderstanding yesterday regarding the waterfront property and Mr. Grayson's boat shed. Our legal team is reviewing the situation. A balding man in the front row raised his hand. "What kind of misunderstanding costs us a $2,000 demolition bill?" Karren's smile tightened. "The board authorized necessary enforcement of our waterfront standards, Mr. Grayson has raised some questions about property boundaries that we're addressing. They're not questions, I called out, standing up. They're facts. I own the entire waterfront parcel, and your HOA demolished a structure on my private property without jurisdiction or authority. The room erupted in murmurs. Karren rapped her gavel. Mr. Grayson, we have a procedure for community input. I think this warrants immediate discussion, interrupted an older woman 2 rows ahead of me. Especially since we've all paid deposits for boat slips on that same waterfront. Karren shot a warning look at the board member beside her, a nervous-looking man with thick glasses who I'd later learn was the treasurer, Richard Walters. The dock project is proceeding as planned, Karren stated firmly. Any property issues will be resolved through appropriate channels. What she means, I said, standing again, is that she authorized the destruction of my property to make way for a dock project on land she doesn't control, and now she's trying to cover it up. That's enough, Karren slammed her gavel. Mr. Grayson, if you can't follow meeting protocols, you'll be asked to leave. I have documentation proving my ownership, I continued, ignoring her threats. And I've confirmed with the county that the HOA has no rights to build anything on my waterfront without my explicit permission. Richard, the treasurer, cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we should adjourn to executive session to discuss legal matters. No, said the older woman who'd spoken earlier, rising to her feet. I paid $2,000 for a boat slip. If there's a problem with the project, I want to know now, not after more of my money is spent. Several other homeowners voiced agreement. The meeting was quickly spiraling beyond Karren's control. The board has been in discussions with Mr. Grayson, Karren lied smoothly. We're confident we'll reach an arrangement that benefits the community. That's not true, I said loudly. There have been no discussions, only unauthorized demolition of my property and vague threats about making an enemy of the board. The room fell silent. Karren's face flushed deep red. Furthermore, I continued, pulling out copies of documents I'd brought, I have here the original survey and deed showing my clear ownership of the waterfront parcel extending 400 yards in both directions from my property line. I've verified this with the county assessor and my attorney. The HOA has been selling boat slips on property it doesn't own or control. I handed copies to several nearby residents who began passing them around. The treasurer, Richard, was now visibly sweating. This meeting is adjourned, Karren announced, standing abruptly. The board will issue a statement after consulting with our attorneys. Wait just a minute, called a man I recognized as a retired judge who lived at the end of my street. If what Mr. Grayson is saying is true, we have a serious problem that requires immediate discussion. I move that we continue the meeting, someone else called out. Seconded, came another voice. Karren looked trapped. According to HOA rules, she couldn't unilaterally end the meeting if the majority wanted to continue. Fine, she said through gritted teeth. Mr. Grayson, please explain your position to the community. For the next 20 minutes, I methodically laid out the facts. My purchase of the waterfront parcel from Elliot Winters, the clear property boundaries, the HOA's demolition of my shed without verification of jurisdiction, and the apparent collection of money for boat slips on property they had no right to develop. As I spoke, I noticed Richard the treasurer whispering urgently to Karren, who kept shaking her head. The other board members looked increasingly uncomfortable when I finished. The retired judge, who introduced himself as Harold Bennett, addressed the board directly. Karren, how much money has been collected for these boat slips, and where are those funds now? Karren glanced at Richard before answering. Approximately $98,000 in deposits. The funds are in the HOA's capital improvement account, as is standard procedure. And did anyone on the board verify property ownership before collecting these funds? Harold pressed. The board has operated under the established understanding that the waterfront is community property, Karren replied evasively. That's not what I asked, Harold said firmly. Did you verify ownership before selling access to it? Karren's composure finally cracked. The previous board assured us the waterfront was under HOA control. We relied on institutional knowledge. In other words, Harold summarized, no, you didn't verify ownership before collecting nearly $100,000 from residents for access to property you don't control. The meeting descended into chaos after that, with angry homeowners demanding refunds and explanations. Karren attempted to restore order, but her authority had evaporated. Eventually, she and the other board members retreated to the office behind the meeting room, leaving the residents to speculate wildly about what had happened. Marcus nudged me as we watched the drama unfold. Dude, you just blew up the HOA's whole power structure in one night. I didn't want this, I said honestly. I just wanted my shed left alone. Well, you might have exposed something bigger, Marcus replied. The way the treasurer was sweating, something's not right with those finances. As residents began to leave, many stopped to introduce themselves and express support or curiosity. I was surprised by how many seemed relieved to see Karren's authority challenged. Apparently, her reign as HOA president had been marked by strict enforcement, rising fees, and little transparency. Harold Bennett, the retired judge, approached me last. Mr. Grayson, I'd like to talk with you privately about this situation. I've had concerns about this board's financial management for some time but couldn't get access to the records. This might be the leverage we need. I agreed to meet him the following day. As I headed toward the exit, Richard the treasurer emerged from the back office, looking pale. Mr. Grayson, he said quietly, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. Could I speak with you? It's important. Intrigued, I followed him to a corner of the now emptying room. Karren isn't being straight with anyone, he whispered, hands trembling slightly. The dock project. It's not just about community access. There's a deal with a commercial tour boat operator. They're paying the HOA well, certain board members to build a dock they can use for their business. That sounds like a kickback scheme, I said, shocked. Richard nodded miserably. I've been trying to track the money, but Karren controls all the accounts now. When I raised questions, she threatened to expose some tax issues from my past. I need this HOA position for my resume. I'm trying to get into local politics. So you went along with fraud to protect yourself, I stated bluntly. He flinched, but didn't deny it. I'm telling you now because it's going to come out anyway. Karren's brother-in-law owns the tour company. The whole shed demolition was rushed because they're behind schedule, and the tour company wants to start operations for the summer tourist season. This was bigger than I'd imagined. Why are you telling me this? Because I can't be part of it anymore, Richard said, straightening slightly. And because you might be the only one who can stop it before we all end up in legal trouble. As Richard walked away, I stood in the empty community center, realizing that my simple property dispute had uncovered what appeared to be a corrupt scheme involving misappropriated HOA funds, commercial kickbacks, and potentially fraud. My demolished boat shed was just the tip of the iceberg. The next morning, I met Harold Bennett at his home, a meticulously maintained Spanish-style house at the end of our street. His wife, Martha, served us coffee on their sun porch overlooking the lake, my lake frontage, technically, while Harold explained his concerns. I've been watching this board since Karren took over last year, he said, his judicial demeanor evident even in retirement. Fees have increased 30%, special assessments have nearly doubled, and yet our services haven't improved. When I requested financial records, I was stonewalled. Richard told me something interesting last night, I said, and shared the treasurer's confession about the commercial tour boat arrangement. Harold's expression darkened. That explains a lot. Commercial activity would violate our community's residential zoning. Not to mention the ethical issues of board members personally profiting from HOA decisions. What should we do? I asked. I want my shed situation addressed, but this seems much bigger now. It is, Harold agreed. I suggest we start by filing a formal police report about the demolition. That gives us a legal record of the property damage. Then, we need to force an emergency HOA meeting with a financial audit on the agenda. Can we do that without the board's approval? The bylaws allow for an emergency meeting if 25% of homeowners petition for one. Between your property issue and the dock deposit situation, we should easily get those signatures. We spent the morning drafting a petition and creating a clear, factual summary of the situation to share with neighbors. Martha, who had been quietly listening, suddenly spoke up. You know, I think Kimberly Harrington's daughter works for the county planning department. She might know if any dock permits have been filed. Harold smiled at his wife. Excellent idea, dear. Commercial docks require special permits. If they've applied for those, it would confirm the commercial intent. By mid-afternoon, Marcus and I had collected 20 signatures from neighbors who were outraged to learn about the situation. The demolition of my shed had already created buzz throughout the community, and people were eager to hear my side of the story. As we approached another home, Karren's sleek Mercedes pulled alongside us. She rolled down her window, her expression glacial. Xavier, I see you're stirring up trouble instead of working through proper channels. The proper channel for property damage is a police report, which I've filed, I replied calmly. And the proper channel for suspected financial mismanagement is homeowner oversight, which is what we're organizing. Her eyes narrowed. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I've run this community efficiently for a year, cleaning up the mess the previous board left. By efficiently, do you mean arranging private commercial deals on property you don't own? I asked pointedly. The color drained from Karren's face. Richard talked, didn't he? That man has always been weak. So you're not denying it, she recovered quickly. I'm not discussing board business on the street. If you had concerns, you should have raised them privately. Like how you privately demolished my shed, I countered. Karren's facade of control slipped again. That shed was an eyesore that would have interfered with community improvements. You mean improvements that would benefit your brother-in-law's tour boat business? She didn't respond directly, instead shifting tactics. The board has already voted to refund your damage costs, Xavier. We're prepared to be reasonable if you are. Is reasonable defined as me quietly accepting your check while you continue to sell access to my waterfront? I asked. Karren's lips thinned. You're making a mistake. This community needs that dock revenue to keep our fees affordable. Then you should have proposed an above-board plan and negotiated access rights properly, I said. Instead, you chose demolition and deception. She revved her engine slightly. This isn't over, Xavier, not by a long shot. With that, she accelerated away, leaving Marcus and me standing on the sidewalk. Dude, Marcus said, wide-eyed. She basically admitted to everything. And threatened me again, I added. Let's keep collecting signatures. By evening, we had 37 signatures, well over the 25% needed for an emergency meeting. Harold filed the petition with the HOA secretary, a timid woman named Barbara, who seemed terrified of crossing Karren, but was obligated by the bylaws to schedule the meeting within 5 days. As word spread about the petition, my phone rang constantly with neighbors wanting details or sharing their own stories of Karren's heavy-handed leadership. One particular call caught my attention: Kimberly Harrington, whose daughter indeed worked for the county planning department. "My daughter Emily checked the records," Kimberly told me. "There's a pending application for a commercial dock permit at our lakefront address, filed by Sunset Cruise Tours LLC. The contact person is James Henderson, Karren's brother-in-law," I confirmed. "Yes, and here's the interesting part. The application falsely claims HOA ownership of the waterfront and includes forged documentation. Emily says that's a felony offense." This was the smoking gun we needed. With Kimberly's permission, I had her daughter email me copies of the fraudulent application. The document clearly showed someone had altered the property records to indicate HOA ownership of my waterfront. I immediately forwarded the evidence to my attorney, Stephanie Martinez, who called me within minutes. "This changes everything, Mr. Grayson," she said, her voice charged with professional excitement. "This isn't just HOA overreach or a civil dispute anymore. This is criminal fraud, forgery of official documents, and possibly conspiracy." "What should our next step be?" I asked. "I'm calling the district attorney's office. Given the amount of money involved in the falsification of county records, they'll want to investigate. In the meantime, proceed with your emergency HOA meeting. Just be careful: people who commit fraud on this scale might not stop there when cornered." Her warning sent a chill through me. I glanced out my window at the partially demolished shed, wondering just how far Karren and her accomplices might go to protect their scheme. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for Friday evening at the community clubhouse. News had spread quickly, and nearly every homeowner planned to attend. The day before the meeting, I noticed unusual activity at Karren's house: people coming and going with boxes and file folders, loading them into cars. Concerned, I called Officer Ramirez, who had responded to my original complaint about the shed. "We're aware of the situation," he assured me. "The district attorney's office has opened an investigation based on the evidence your attorney provided. We're monitoring the Henderson residence, but we can't take action until we have a warrant, which is in process." "They look like they're removing records," I said, watching another box being carried out. "Document it if you can, but don't confront them," the officer advised. "If they're destroying evidence, that's another charge." From my home office window, I used my camera with a telephoto lens to photograph the activity. Among the visitors, I recognized Richard, the treasurer, and 2 other board members. They appeared to be in a heated argument with Karren on her driveway, with Richard gesturing wildly at the boxes. Just after noon, Richard unexpectedly showed up at my door, looking disheveled and anxious. "Karren's destroying financial records," he blurted before I could even greet him. "She's shredding everything related to the dock project and the deposits." "I've already alerted the police," I told him. "They're working on a warrant." Richard ran his hands through his thinning hair. "It might be too late by then. She's planned for this contingency. There's a second set of books showing the dock deposits as landscape reserve funds. She's going to claim at the meeting that there never was a commercial arrangement, just a community dock project that was miscommunicated." "But what about the permit application with her brother-in-law's company?" "She'll claim he was just consulting as a marine expert, not as a business partner. It's all been choreographed." Richard looked truly miserable. I should have spoken up sooner, but I was afraid of what it would do to my career prospects. "You can make it right now," I said. "Would you be willing to give a sworn statement about what you know?" He hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Yes, I've been complicit for too long. I immediately called Stephanie, who arranged for Richard to meet with an investigator from the district attorney's office that afternoon. His testimony accelerated the investigation, and by evening, the district attorney had secured an emergency warrant. At 7:30 p.m., as homeowners were arriving for the emergency meeting, 2 police cruisers pulled up outside the community clubhouse. Officer Ramirez and 3 other officers entered, heading directly for the board table where Karren and the remaining loyal board members were arranging their papers. "Karren Henderson," Officer Ramirez asked formally, though he clearly recognized her from our previous encounter. Karren straightened, adjusting her blazer. "Yes, we're about to start an important community meeting. I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of fraud, forgery of official documents, and criminal conspiracy," he stated, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I also have a warrant to seize all HOA financial records and documentation related to the Waterfront dock project." The room went completely silent. Karren's face cycled through shock, outrage, and finally, a calculated calm. "This is ridiculous," she declared. "Officer, I'm an elected official of this association conducting legitimate business. Whatever Mr. Grayson has told you is a vindictive fabrication because of a simple misunderstanding about his shed." Officer Ramirez was unmoved. "Madam, these warrants are based on evidence including falsified county permit applications, financial records provided by your treasurer, and documented misappropriation of homeowner funds. Please stand and place your hands behind your back." Karren looked around the room, perhaps seeking allies, but found only shocked and curious faces. Even her fellow board members had subtly distanced themselves from her. With no options remaining, she complied with the officer's instructions, maintaining her dignity as the handcuffs were applied. "James Henderson and 2 other individuals are being arrested simultaneously," Officer Ramirez informed the stunned crowd. "This is part of an ongoing investigation into fraud and corruption involving your HOA funds." As Karren was escorted out, the homeowners erupted in conversation. Harold Bennett quickly took control of the situation, calling the meeting to order despite the dramatic interruption. "Given these extraordinary circumstances," he announced, "I move that we continue with our agenda, which includes discussion of the waterfront property issues and financial oversight of our HOA." The meeting proceeded. Though without the board leadership present, it transformed into more of a community forum. I presented my property documentation again for those who hadn't seen it, explaining calmly that while I legally owned the waterfront, I had always intended to allow community access, just not commercial exploitation. "My issue was never with neighbors enjoying the lakefront," I explained. "It was with the HOA demolishing my property without authority and attempting to commercialize land they didn't own." By the end of the evening, the community had voted to form an interim board to manage HOA affairs until a proper election could be held. Harold was unanimously selected as interim president, with 4 other respected homeowners joining him. The district attorney's investigation uncovered the full extent of Karren's scheme over the following weeks. She had indeed arranged for her brother-in-law's tour boat company to use the planned community dock as their base of operations, in exchange for kickbacks disguised as consulting fees. The nearly $100,000 collected from homeowners for boat slips was meant to fund construction, with additional HOA funds diverted through inflated landscaping and maintenance contracts. 3 months after that chaotic evening, justice was served. Karren pleaded guilty to multiple charges to avoid a trial, receiving a 3-year prison sentence and orders to pay substantial restitution. Her brother-in-law and 2 other board members received lesser sentences for their roles in the conspiracy. As for my boat shed, I rebuilt it properly this time, with a design that complemented the lakefront aesthetic. The new HOA board, led by Harold, worked with me to develop reasonable guidelines for waterfront structures that respected both my property rights and community standards. Most importantly, we drafted a transparent agreement regarding community lake access. I granted the HOA a formal easement for residential recreational use of the waterfront while maintaining my property rights. In return, the HOA covered the insurance and maintenance costs for the shoreline areas used by residents. The community did eventually build a dock, a modest, attractive structure designed for residential use only, with equal access for all homeowners. It became a gathering place where neighbors connected, children learned to swim, and the community spirit that Karren had damaged began to heal. One evening a year later, as I sat on my new dock watching the sunset with Marcus and several other neighbors who had become friends through this ordeal, Harold raised his beer in a toast. "To Xavier," he said with a smile. "The man who just wanted a boat shed and ended up saving our community." I laughed, slightly embarrassed by the attention. I never wanted to be a community activist. I just wanted to be left alone with my boats and my lakefront. "Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone," Marcus's wife observed. "If you hadn't fought back, who knows how much more money Karren would have stolen or how many other homeowners would have been bulldozed." As I looked out over the peaceful lake, at neighbors enjoying the waterfront that I legally owned but willingly shared, I reflected on how differently things might have turned out. If I had simply accepted Karren's initial explanation, if I had backed down in the face of HOA intimidation, not only would I have lost my property rights, but an entire community would have continued suffering under corrupt leadership. My demolished boat shed had been the catalyst for exposing a much larger problem. In fighting to protect what was mine, I had inadvertently protected an entire community's interests. And in the process, I had found something I hadn't even realized. I was missing a sense of belonging and connection to the place I called home. The new boat shed stood stronger than before, a symbol of resilience against petty tyranny. But the true victory wasn't in the rebuilt structure, it was in the rebuilt community around it. One that valued transparency, respect for property rights, and actual neighborliness over rigid rule enforcement. Karren's reign of HOA terror had ended, but the lessons remained. Always verify your property rights, never assume HOA authority is unlimited, and sometimes, the person who seems like a troublemaker for challenging the status quo might just be the hero your community needs.